Dear Yanzu, may I ask, after crossing over, what should I do with Yuli lying next to me? Waiting online, it's quite urgent. Keywords of the novel. Siheyuan. Starting from driving a big car without pop-ups, Siheyuan. Starting from driving a big car, download the complete text, Siheyuan. Starting from driving a big car, read the latest chapters. Chapter 1. Is quite anxious. You are listening at novel full.audio. Chapter 1 is quite anxious pain. It hurts so much. The unique pain of a hangover explodes in my mind like a depth bomb. Li Weidong only felt a sudden jump in his temples. Ma Dan, Japanese sake, why is there so much momentum? Lazily opening his eyes, he shouted at the top of his throat, Dead Mima Sai, come and work on a bottle of mineral water. Wait for a long time. No movement. My throat was as dry and cracked as if it had been exposed to the sun all day, and swallowing saliva felt hot and spicy. Although the long legs next to him, dressed like spider spirits, are an expert. The program is also full of energy. However, the service fee of 2 million yen, which doesn't even include a bottle of mineral water, is too unreasonable. Is it a black shop? If it's not for learning a foreign language, why come to your country of Japan? Is this how you treat foreign guests? Be sure to go to the tourism bureau to complain about you. By the way, isn't there a big long leg lying next to her? Let her go get some water. Li Weidong groped his hand into the bed in a daze, following the warm breath and groping towards it. Pa, Dami Marseille, stop sleeping and work on the water. Her long legs hummed a hint of dreaminess, and she rolled over in a daze. Li Weidong's hand was pressed under her soft body. Oh, I'm too tired to move. Dead me Marseille, get up, subconsciously clenching with his right hand. Li Weidong's throat and eyes seemed to be tightly locked with iron pliers, and his voice abruptly stopped. Not right. Someone changed. Is it a fairy dance? Li Weidong's heart tightened and he suddenly opened his eyes. The first thing that catches the eye is the mottled and dirty ceiling. Looking down, the photo frame on the blue brick wall, the clothes rack welded with 3 steel bars, the dark and rusty coal stove, and a crooked wooden table are all the furniture in the room. Twist your stiff neck and look over. A stranger girl was resting on the same yellowed buckwheat pillow with him, her eyebrows furrowed tightly and her face tinged with pain. With a translucent white melon seed face, a high nose bridge, tightly closed eyes, and a teardrop on her eyelashes. Her eyelashes were very long, and the teardrop was held in her eyelashes. With the slight tremble of her eyelashes, it seemed like it was about to fall off, but it didn't fall off. It silently made people feel heartbroken. Li Weidong can be certain that the girl is not the charming and long-legged one from yesterday. A delicate face that makes one unable to resist pity. A charming and unrestrained person who can't help but learn a foreign language. At this point, the original owner's memory gradually revived. That's right, he has traveled through time. From a 21st century to an era of burning passion. At Blue Star, time travel is a very popular activity. Someone travels to a different world and becomes the son of a plane, picking stars with their hands and breaking through rivers and mountains with their feet. Someone traveled back to ancient times and became a hegemon, dominating 3,000 beautiful women in the harem. Some people have traveled back decades to become a technological hegemon, leaving a good reputation in history. Has anyone crossed over to the bed? Li Weidong seemed to remember something and suddenly became nervous. He opened the blanket and glanced inside. Fortunately, they are all wearing autumn pants. If there is a cross-server network signal, Li Weidong will definitely post a help post on the Chiba. Dear LSPs, may I ask what I should do when I travel back to the 1960s and sleep in the same bed with a girl, with a group of people waiting outside? I'm waiting online, it's quite urgent. Due to fate, we gather together in the world. With the revival of the original owner's memory, Li Weidong gradually understood the ins and outs of the matter. He traveled to the world of, full of Siheyuan. The original owner's name is also Li Weidong. He lost his mother at a young age and recently lost his father, who was a truck driver at a steel rolling mill, on duty. The factory adopts a succession system, with fathers leaving and sons taking over, and rarely hires workers from outside. Li Weidong naturally received a spot and will report to the transportation convoy of the steel rolling mill next week. In this era, truck drivers are very popular. High status, high salary, and legal extras. Yan Zhichen, the eldest son of Yan Bugui, a master of the quadrangle courtyard, has no formal job. Yan Bugui, who is good at calculation, started to have a bad idea for Li Weidong. Honest and not talkative. In the words of later generations, it means having social anxiety disorder. In this era, it is called cowardice. Don't bully him, bully who? Yan Bugui set up a table at home to celebrate Li Weidong's succession. He had a pure and kind personality, was dull and clumsy in his speech, and was unaware of the dangers in his heart. He was intoxicated at a banquet. At the same time, Yan Zhicheng's fiancée Ae Yuli was also intoxicated. Yan Bugui took Yan Zhicheng and sent the two of them to bed. Prepare to bring someone to arrest. Using his unmarried daughter in law to set up a fairy dance is an incredible practice, but Yan Bugui has a shrewd calculation. On the one hand, Li Weidong has mistreated his daughter in law and always needs to make compensation. The quota for a truck driver is not considered outrageous, is it? Otherwise, I would wait to be sent to the police station, squat on the fence for a few years, and spend my whole life destroyed. On the other hand, Yuli sleeps in the same bed as other men, spreading it will definitely ruin her reputation. Yan Zhicheng showed a bit of generosity at the right time and reluctantly accepted her. The 3 turns and 1 sound during marriage can save 70.2 legs. The woman's home may even be upside down. Of course, the most crucial thing is that the entire matter is under the control of Yan Bugui. He won't leave time for Li Weidong to cuddle with grass and hunt rabbits. Ah, this Yan Lao Kai really knows how to calculate. After understanding Yan Bugui's conspiracy through the memory of the original owner, Li Weidong quickly pushed Yuli. Hey, wake up, let's put on our clothes. Yuli snorted, turned her head, and fell back into a deep sleep, appearing to be unable to wake up for a short time. I don't know how to drink and still try to show off, so I'm suffering now. It seems that there is no way to let Yuli leave on her own. Just as Li Weidong looked left and right, seeking the timing to escape, a clear voice came to his mind. Ding, it has been detected that the host is in a quadrangle world. Congratulations to the host for obtaining that Space Warehouse X1 and 10,000 times experience system. Sure enough, as a standard accessory for travelers, Golden Finger will only be late, not absent. Carefully reading the instruction manual of Golden Finger, Li Weidong widened his eyes. Hua, it's too awesome. 10,000 times experience system. The experience gained by the host in work is 10,000 times that of an ordinary person. As for the spatial warehouse, that's even more impressive. A full 50 cubic meters, the items placed in the system space will remain in their original state, just like time and space are stationary. There are thieves in the courtyard, and the space warehouse is just right for them. Just as I finished reading the instructions, there was a rapid sound of footsteps coming from far to near outside the door. Quick, fast, we must not let that kid Li Weidong succeed. Jie Cheng, don't worry, both of them are drunk, it's impossible to think about anything. Can I rest assured? That's my wife. You're just too calculating. When you become a truck driver, Dad will find you a formal female worker in a textile factory. Don't think too much, you know it's the one who caught the traitor. Wake up, hi, wake up. Li Weidong pushed Yuli again. Yuli snorted twice, flipped over, lifted her long legs away from the bed, and draped them over the blanket. Sorry for the trouble, if you are really caught, you will be held by Yan Bugue from now on. What should we do? Li Weidong pulled up the blanket and helped Yuli cover it, rubbing his fingers against her soft calves, and his eyes lit up. There's a way. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Yuli's Disappearance. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Yuli's Disappearance. Outside the door. Yan Bugue and Yan Jiecheng ran panting and sweating profusely from their foreheads. No wonder they are so anxious. It has been a full hour since Li Weidong and Yuli were placed in the same bed. Although both of them were drunk and lost their practical skills, Yan Jiecheng still felt uneasy. If something happens, wouldn't it be wearing a green hat? Everyone blames you for coming up with such a crooked idea. Yan Jiecheng walked quickly, complaining. How could you blame me? I didn't know that Yi Zhonghai would come to my house and just sit down and don't leave. Yan Bugue looked helpless. Don't make any noise, hurry up and save Yuli. The third ant followed from behind with a rolling pin. The three of them quickly arrived at Li Weidong's doorstep. Quan Dang, Yan Jiecheng kicked the door open, took the rolling pin from the hands of the three mothers, and rammed it onto the bed. I'll let you guys mess around. He was very strong, and the rolling pin turned into a black light, landing on the blanket and making a dull sound. The blanket is shrunk, and there is no one on the bed at all. Yan Jiecheng was stunned. Yan Bugue's eyes widened. Sandama took a deep breath. Where is Li Weidong? What about Yuli? The three of them looked at each other and saw extreme shock in each other's eyes as they were about to search inside the house. Well, Jiecheng brother, will you bring a stick to my house to randomly ram and beat mice? Just then, a voice came from behind them. Turning his head, Li Weidong walked out of the inner room carrying an enamel jar. He looked at the three of them with an incredulous expression on his face. The three exchanged vague glances and exchanged glances. Yan Jiecheng clenched his rolling pin and rushed over with a fierce momentum. Li Weidong, where is Yuli from my family? Yuli, look at what you're saying, your own fiancée AE, you're asking me. Li Weidong took out a cigarette from his pocket and held it in his mouth, looking carefree. Yan Jiecheng was asked in silence, and could only turn his gaze to Yan Bugue for help. Useless guy. Yan Bugue's small eyes rolled around behind the tortoiseshell frame, and he bent down with a shy smile, saying, Wei Dong, this is the situation. You also know that Yuli is kind-hearted. Just now, she was afraid that you would get drunk and no one would take care of you, so she wanted to bring you a bowl of hot water. Who would have thought that if you left, you would never come back? You, Jiecheng, are also anxious. Although he didn't know how Li Weidong, who had always been dull, could become so eloquent, Yan Bugue still decided to treat him with caution. He had vague negative thoughts about Yuli's disappearance. If only I had said that earlier. Li Weidong gave Yan Jiecheng a sideways glance. Selling his fiancée AE for the sake of his job is truly despicable. Draw a match and light a cigarette. Hiss, who, spit out a large ball of white smoke. Then, amidst the hopeful gazes of the three, he said coldly, however, I really haven't seen Yuli. Why don't you go look elsewhere? Li Weidong is a person who has studied performing arts and portrays innocence vividly. If Yan Jiecheng had not personally placed Yuli in Li Weidong's bed, he would have truly believed his lies. Wei Dong, Yuli said she came to your house. Why don't you let us search for it? Search. Li Weidong threw the enamel jar on the table and glanced at Yan Bugue. Third master, you're really interesting. You keep saying that Yuli is at my house, so there's concrete evidence. Even if the comrades in the police station need to search in order to solve the case, they still need to provide proof documents. It's better for you to search directly. You, the three masters of the courtyard, are even more powerful than the comrades in the police station. Yan Bugue's face turned red and he trembled all over when he was scolded. Li Weidong was such a good person in the past, why did he suddenly fall out of favor? Li Weidong, do you want me to search? Yan Zhicheng thought about his fiancée Ae and his eyes widened in anger. What he was most afraid of was that Li Weidong had mistreated Yuli and then hit her. That's his fiancée Ae. No search, what's going on? You still want to take action. Li Weidong rolled up his sleeves as he spoke, revealing his strong muscles and putting on a fighting posture. He remembers that in the original work, Yan Zhicheng was brought to power by Yu Lier for a lifetime and was a soft egg. Moreover, if Yan Zhicheng dares to take action, that would be even better. Take the opportunity to teach this beast a good lesson. Sure enough. The imposing Yan Zhicheng saw that Li Weidong was not convinced and dared not go up, so he could only stand awkwardly in place. Cough, cough. Yan Bugui stood in front of Yan Zhicheng by mistake, took a deep breath, and said slowly, Weidong, your father and I have been old friends for many years, and our relationship is good. Can you make an offer? Good relationship, can we do such dirty things? But don't waste the money delivered to your door. 50 yuan, I'll let you search. Li Weidong's mouth twitched with a look of heartache. 50 yuan. Why don't you go grab it? Sandama jumped up, her hair standing on end. Your Sandiyi only costs 27.5 yuan per month. Oh, I forgot my era. Okay, uncle will give you 50 cents, do you think it's okay? Yan Bugui looked very imposing. Your 50 cents is really big, Li Weidong pouted. Big. Yan Bugui understood, this kid is too young. It's not easy for him to come up with 50 cents, as even a passing garbage truck needs to taste the salty taste. With the intention of throwing away his sleeve, but also thinking that his daughter in-law is still nowhere to be seen, he can only grit his teeth and raise the price. 1 yuan. 1 yuan is too big. 1 yuan 1. Too big. 2 yuan. Deal. Li Weidong looked at Yan Bugui's face, so black that it could drip ink. He knew that if he continued to bid, this old man would really not want his daughter-in-law. Yan Bugui is a primary school teacher. These days, the teacher's salary is not high, with a monthly salary of 27.5 yuan. He has to support a large family, and this 2 yuan is undoubtedly a piece of flesh cut from him. He took out a 2 yuan ticket from his pocket and handed it over, grinning in pain. If I had known earlier, I would have called it 1.95 yuan. He made up his mind that when he found Yu Li, he would not only snatch Li Weidong's job, but also fiercely blackmail him. Well, at least blackmail him 8 yuan. Li Weidong took the money and put it into his cotton jacket pocket. He sat down on a chair, crossed his legs, and said calmly, all right, you can search now, but I warn you that if something is damaged, you must compensate according to the price. Understood, understood. The three of them began to rummage through boxes and cabinets. Under the bed, behind the door, in the bathtub, in every corner. I flipped through everything, but found nothing. The three of them looked at each other with a bewildered expression. A living person disappeared out of thin air. Before the liberation, Yan Bugui watched the trick of transforming into a living person on the overpass, but he couldn't do it that way. No, I've already spent 2 yuan. If I can't find my daughter-in-law again, I'll lose a lot. The three of them flipped through it again, inside and outside, carefully and meticulously. Even the panties in the box were taken out and shook by Yan Zhicheng. Hush, there's a hole ahead. Just as Yan Zhicheng was about to dig up the blue bricks on the ground, Yan Bugui waved his hand. All right, stop being busy. Yuli can't be in this room. Look, I told you so long ago, you still don't believe me. Li Weidong, the little bear, spread out his hand, looking as if he had known so well before. The end of the calf, fiancé Ae, gone missing. Yan Zhicheng threw his head down in a daze, his eyes turning black and he almost fainted to the ground. Yan Bugui supported his forehead and said something he didn't even believe. Perhaps Yuli met a neighbor halfway and went to their house to chat. Yes, it must be like this. Let's go find it in the courtyard now. Yan Zhichen woke up, nodded repeatedly with last hope, pushed open the door, and ran out. He can't afford to consider whether Li was the one he personally put into bed. As long as there is a glimmer of hope, he can't give up. Yan Bugui and the three aunties also think the same way. The two of them didn't even bother to say hello and hurriedly ran out. Yuli, where are you? The silence of the courtyard was shattered by the urgent cries. Li Weidong stood up and looked out the window, but the three of them were nowhere to be seen. Pull up the yellow waxwood window, close the dilapidated door, and use a lever to secure it. After confirming that there are no further omissions, open the warehouse space. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Wife, isn't this what I got? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Wife, isn't this what I got? Li Weidong took Yuli out of the warehouse space and laid her flat on the bed. She took out her blue and black cotton jacket, red sweater, and black cotton pants from the warehouse space and placed them one by one at the bedside. Finally, there is a pair of labor protection flip shoes with hard and heavy soles. After everything was set up, Li Weidong turned his head to look at Yuli, who was wearing a red autumn robe with a furrowed eyebrow, but still felt that something was wrong. Isn't this girl going to cause trouble when she wakes up? How about helping her put on her clothes? He held his chin in his hand and pondered for a moment, then picked up his black cotton pants, lifted the blanket, and prepared to put it on for Yuli. Just as she lifted those two long legs, Yuli's eyelashes trembled twice. Those black eyes slowly opened, their gaze fixed on the black cotton pants, and their pupils suddenly contracted. Li Weidong looked at the black cotton pants, and then at Yuli. I said, I want to help you put on your pants, do you believe me? Yuli's consciousness gradually broke free from the drunken chaos, and her small face suddenly turned red. She was about to shout at the top of her throat when she heard Li Weidong say coldly, shout it out, tear open your throat and shout. Now Yan Bugui and Yan Zhichen are outside. If you want them to come in and catch the traitor, just shout. At this moment, Yuli was completely awake, recalling the scene of being heavily drunk by Yan Bugui and Yan Zhichen at the banquet, and instantly understood the whole story. 2 lines of hot tears slid down her fair and smooth cheeks. She hugged the blanket and curled up tightly into a ball. Just like an injured little white rabbit, it is irresistible to care for. Li Weidong couldn't bear to see girls cry the most, so he straightened his face and comforted, why cry? In a few days, I will find a matchmaker to propose marriage to your house. After marrying you back, I will tuck you into the bed. Isn't that the same as now? We just rehearsed in advance, what's so sad about it? In the past life, this kind of thing was nothing at all. But in this era, the folk customs are conservative, and young men and women are partners. Walking on the street, they dare not even hold hands. Yuli, a yellow flower girl, surprisingly slept with a man in the same bed. If it spreads, it will be difficult to get married in this lifetime. The crying came to an abrupt end, and Yuli lifted her head. In his hazy gaze, the man was wearing a blue and black work clothes cotton jacket. His washed white cuffs were folded up, revealing a section of his slender arm. His posture was straight, like a tall and slender bamboo tree. The warm winter sun scattered through the glass window, coating his chiseled cheeks with a pale gold color. Yuli was surprised that she had not noticed before that Li Weidong was so handsome. Setting aside the awkward situation between the two, Yuli felt that Li Weidong could be considered a handsome comparison in the courtyard district. At this moment, the Shuai's heart is full of ups and downs. This girl's eyes are spinning around, have you decided to call the police? A hard mouth and a guilty heart. When this kind of thing spreads, the woman can't lift her head, but the man has to squat on the fence. Instead of that, it's better to, Comrade Yuli, go and report to the police. Although I was framed, I unintentionally stained your innocence and should be punished. Turning around, he bowed deeply to the mirror frame hanging on the wall and said, Dad, my son is unfilial and incompetent. He has been framed by treacherous people and cannot pass on the family line to our old Li family. When he goes underground, I will be filial to you. The tone is heavy and the expression is painful, enough to win the Golden Statue Award. After speaking, he picked up the tattered felt hat placed on the clothes rack and said with a resolute expression, I will go to the police station to surrender myself. Don't worry, I will let the public security comrades keep it a secret for you, and your reputation will not be affected. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps just as Li Weidong was holding on to the doorpost. Don't go, go. Yu Li's timid voice came from behind. Li Weidong stood still, his fist-clenched palms slowly loosened, and he turned around with a sincere expression, saying, in a few days, I'll have the matchmaker come to your house to propose a marriage. Yu Li's little face turned red. Yu Li pushed open the door and walked out. Li Weidong watched her figure disappear into the sunlight and hummed a little song with pride. Taking both soft and hard measures, working together, isn't it that my wife has obtained it? Sure enough, people who rely solely on their own efforts, no matter which world they travel to, are all human beings. Pick up the iron shell tea bottle, pour an enamel jar of boiling water, and take a sip. The white heat covered his face, and Li Weidong fell into contemplation. It is obvious that time travel is already a fact. Since it cannot be changed, then silently bear it. I didn't care about my past life, I was an orphan. Thanks to my own efforts, I bought 1,000 yuan of Bitcoin in 2011, and since then, I have achieved financial freedom. Don't worry about life, life will lose its purpose. The whole day at the clubhouse is a tender model, and life is boring and boring. In this era of passionate worship, as long as you persevere for a few years, by the time spring flowers bloom, relying on your own efforts and with a little assistance from the system, you will inevitably have a great career. It's just a pity that there are 500 T of learning materials in the e-drive of the notebook. After making up his mind, Li Weidong began to take stock of his belongings. Money, 10 yuan and 20 cents, and 200 caddies of grain coupons. Half a bag of stick noodles should weigh 5 pounds. 3 eggs, 2 taels of white sugar, and half a can of high shatter. 2 sets of old cotton jackets. TSK, you're really poor. Hey, what is this, I owe you? Li Weidong dug out a note from the drawer. I borrowed 100 yuan, 300 yuan, from Yi Zhonghai, an old man, for my father's medical treatment. I promised to repay it 1 month later. If I cannot repay it, I am willing to give my 2 rooms to Yi Zhonghai. Borrower. Li Weidong, lender. Yi Zhonghai, witness. Hiyuzhu, Qin Huairu, the borrowing date is October 15, 1965. There are 4 red fingerprints on the note. Li Weidong looked at the note, then looked up at the cramped and dilapidated room, and raised his right hand to pinch the center of his brow. So, I don't even have a rundown room now. This is simply the beginning of hell. The messy memories gathered again, and Li Weidong remembered. After his original father had an accident, he did not die on the spot and was taken to the 6th People's Hospital by passers-by. After the doctor's treatment, his life was temporarily saved, but his body was damaged and he could only lie in bed all day. In the following days, he was in poor health and often fell ill. The factory provided a pension of 102 yuan, which was quickly spent. As his father's illness worsened, Li Weidong had to resign from his job as a temporary worker in a chemical materials store and take full care of his father. Without a source of income, the savings accumulated over the years were quickly depleted. Finally, Li Weidong had to use his house as collateral and borrowed 100 yuan from Yi Zhonghai. After understanding the whole story, Li Weidong was somewhat impressed by his predecessor. This kid, although foolish, is indeed a filial child. To this day, his memory still retains the heartbreaking feeling of his predecessor when his father passed away. Of course, we cannot say that our predecessor was foolish. He is just as simple as most people in this era. In the eyes of his predecessor, Yi Zhonghai, as a master of a courtyard house, was always willing to help others. Even if he is unable to repay the debt, Yi Zhonghai will allow him to extend the repayment date. As long as you become a truck driver, work hard, and save for 3 months, you can repay the money. Li Weidong, who had watched, full of love in a courtyard, in his previous life, knew that Yi Zhonghai was a person of moral integrity. Always under the guise of being good for others, engaging in moral kidnapping of others and seeking personal gain for themselves. As long as the money is not repaid, Yi Zhonghai will definitely take the house without mercy. Li Weidong naturally cannot let him fulfill his wish. How long is there until the day of repaying the money now? End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Impossible, absolutely impossible. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Impossible, absolutely impossible. Li Weidong's gaze fell on the calendar on the wall. The bright red characters made his pupils contract sharply. November 10, 1965. There are only 5 days left until the repayment date. In this era, the difficulty of earning over 100 yuan in just 5 days is comparable to earning a small goal every year in later generations. How could I agree? Are 2 people sleeping in the same bed and getting married? Yuli, you are a woman of the new era. Why do you still believe in this feudal scum? Yuli walked towards the courtyard outside the faint sunset. Thinking of what she had just experienced, she still felt unbelievable. After much thought, she still felt that she had been conquered by the charm of Li Weidong. His broad shoulders look very reliable. And wait another half-month, he will be the truck driver. As the saying goes, the sound of the horn is comparable to that of a county magistrate. Yuli is a bold and ambitious person. At the same time, her vision is also very long-term. Otherwise, they wouldn't have broken through numerous obstacles and opened a restaurant after the spring breeze arrived. In her opinion, Li Weidong has much more prospects than Yan Zhichen. Marrying a Han, dressing and eating, who wouldn't want to marry someone who can earn money? Thinking this way, a faint smile couldn't help but appear on her face. At that moment, the sound coming from behind shattered her good mood. Yuli, where did you go just now? Yan Zhichen searched the entire courtyard but couldn't find Yuli. He was about to go to Li Weidong's house again and desperately search for him. Seeing Yuli, he was overjoyed and ran over quickly. Looking up and down at Yuli, it seems like trying to discern from the subtle details whether she is Pop. Just as I glanced at him, I slapped him on the right cheek. Yuli, what are you doing? Yan Zhichen covered his face and looked at Yuli incredulously. Yan Zhichen, you are better than beasts. Yuli raised her eyebrows, and her happy expression disappeared from her face in an instant. Is this exposed? Yan Zhichen widened his eyes with anger and said, Are you, Li Weidong, you guys? Thinking that his fiancée Ae might have been slept by Li Weidong, Yan Zhichen felt a cold wind blowing and his head felt a bit cold. He couldn't help but touch his head. Pop. He received another hard slap on the left cheek. A bright red palm print on one side is finally symmetrical. We slept together, isn't that what you expected? Yuli gritted her teeth tightly, her angry eyes wide open, and her willow leaf eyebrows arched. You. Yan Zhichen's eyes darkened and he almost fainted to the ground. My fiancée Ae was personally given to Li Weidong. Want to cry without tears? We don't have a relationship anymore. I will marry Li Weidong next month. Yuli didn't even glance at him, turned around and ran towards the outside of the door, kicking and staring. Yuli. Yan Zhichen watched as her figure disappeared outside the door, swaying twice before falling to the ground. He was supported by Yan Bugue who ran from behind. Jie Cheng, what's wrong with you? What's wrong? It's all you're doing. Yuli got married by Li Weidong. They're getting married. Yan Jicheng suppressed the intense pain in his heart, shook his shoulders left and right twice, broke free from Yan Bugui's hands, and ran back to the house with tears streaming down his face. What's that? It's impossible, absolutely impossible. They were all drunk. Yan Bugui scratched his head, his small eyes behind his tortoiseshell-framed glasses filled with confusion. Old man, I've told you before that people can't be too calculating. Now, your daughter-in-law has also been calculated and run away. The third aunt shook her head helplessly. When Yan Bugui proposed to take Li Weidong, she opposed it. Li Weidong is such a good child. Whoever has a happy occasion, he is always the first to help. Qin Huairu grows locust flowers, and it is difficult to give birth in the middle of the night. It was Li Weidong and silly Zhu who braved the heavy snow and pushed a cart to take Qin Huairu to the hospital. Long hair, short knowledge, you know what? Yan Bugui was angry. Facing the three aunties, she scolded them head-on and said, as a big family, we all rely on my monthly salary of 27.5 per food and drink. Am I easy? You, the three aunties knew Yan Bugui's temperament and shook their heads before entering the room. She wants to comfort Yan Jicheng. This child, without saying anything, feels really uncomfortable when his fiancée A.E. is robbed by someone else. Alas, it's a sin. Their nagging made Yan Bugui feel very unhappy. Over the years, he has always been proud of his small calculations. In the courtyard, apart from the fool Zhu who is generous, no one has been taken advantage of by him. Unexpectedly, Li Weidong, who had always been his scapegoat, silently fired a shot at him. Li Weidong, you have caused trouble for the third master. Yan Bugui paced at the door with a mournful expression, murmuring to himself. Yi Zhonghai, who was passing by, heard that he had already walked to the entrance of the courtyard and then turned around to walk next to Yan Bugui. Old Yan, what's wrong with Li Weidong? Yan Bugui opened his mouth to complain to Yi Zhonghai, but found that he couldn't speak up. Sending your own daughter-in-law to someone else's bed and saying it's embarrassing. He, anyway, is the troublemaker in our courtyard. Yan Bugui's face turned red and he hesitated for a while before finally holding back this sentence. A fecal stirring stick. Isn't that a silly pillar? Yi Zhonghai glanced suspiciously at Yan Bugui. Old Yan must have something hidden from me. It doesn't seem to matter, as long as he hates Li Weidong. Do you remember when I lent Li Weidong 100 yuan half a month ago? Yi Zhonghai leaned over to Yan Bugui and chuckled inwardly. Remember, it seems like Li Weidong mortgaged the house to you, Yan Bugui said in the middle of his sentence. Suddenly, he woke up and his eyes widened. Lao Yi, you don't want to grab the house, do you? Harm, why are you talking so hard? What's robbery? He owes me money from Li Weidong and I can't pay it back. It's not reasonable for me to take back the house, Yi Zhonghai said. TSK, he is indeed an old master of a courtyard house. This little plan is really clever. Li Weidong's family has 2 private rooms, covering an area of 50 square meters. They can be sold for over 200 yuan by finding someone who can pull a drill rod. After a moment of contemplation, Yan Bugui understood the truth behind it. Don't worry, I'll stand on your side when the time comes. If Li Weidong dares not vacate the house, the 3 of us housekeepers will go find the street office. If you say that, I can rest assured. Yi Zhonghai hummed a small tune and walked away with his hands behind his back. At this point, Li Weidong has completely integrated the memories of his predecessor, with a brilliant smile on his face. This is really a courtyard full of emotions. In his past life, this bizarre TV series was often used by doctors to treat hypotension. As long as the patient watches 2 episodes, their blood pressure will directly return to normal. Watching the entire TV series, my blood pressure will explode just by rubbing against it. In a TV drama, many great talents come together. A dignified appearance can easily be found in the middle of the sea, while a big stick can be found in the father's bangs. Undead wizard Jia Zhang, vampire Qin Huairu. Little-bellied chicken intestine Su Damao, licking the dog god of war Hiyuzhu. Yen Bugue, shrewd in calculation, is an unidentified deaf old lady. Among the few good people, there are only Lu Xiaoa and He Rainwater. This world is extremely interesting. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Qin Huairu, do you want to repay the money? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5 Qin Huairu, do you want to repay the money? In the morning sun hangs low on the rows of tube-shaped buildings. A faint golden light spreads throughout the capital, coating everything with a layer of pale gold color. The weather was cold, and Li Weidong dug out a bald and tattered felt hat from the cabinet and put it on his head. He pushed open the door and walked out. Although he has inherited the memories of the original owner, Li Weidong still feels curious about the world of an unfamiliar era. The courtyard is paved with blue bricks, and all three sides are antique blue brick and tile houses. There are 2 rooms side by side, totaling 6 rooms, forming a zigzag layout. In addition, the few houses behind form a front courtyard, middle courtyard, back courtyard, and even an inverted courtyard, forming a 4-courtyard courtyard. There is a brick-built water pool in the center of the courtyard. There is a gray-white faucet in the pool. A group of daughter-in-law gathered around the faucet to wash clothes. Pulling up the sleeves of the cotton jacket, my little hands were red from the cold and looked very tired. However, there is no other way. The factory sends out 2 sets of winter clothing every year. In winter, the sun is short and the weather is cold. If it cannot be washed out early and hung on a wire rope to dry, it may delay wearing. One of the little daughter-in-law saw Li Weidong walking over, her eyes lit up, shook off the water droplets on her hand, and stood up to welcome him. The little daughter-in-law is wearing blue and black work clothes. Black and straight, with a full figure and a mature woman's unique charm between the eyebrows. Although I am almost 30 years old, the place that should be big is convex. Especially the tight peaches, swaying with their legs, below their left buttocks and above their right buttocks, below the right buttocks, above the left buttocks, this cycle repeats endlessly. Such simple and primitive actions can make men unable to resist itching. Most men would make a slight movement as a gesture of respect. Li Weidong recognized at a glance that she was Qin Huairu. A tea master who sucks the courtyard over with his mouth. The predecessor borrowed over 100 yuan from Yi Zhonghai, and at least 5 yuan was borrowed by her. Of course, for Qin Huairu, borrowing is equivalent to taking, and she won't repay it. Li Weidong saw Qin Huairu running over with a joyful face, and naturally understood her plan. I want to borrow money again. In the courtyard, Qin Huairu has 2 objects who often collect wool. Formerly known as Li Weidong and Silly Zhu. Silly Pillar is willing to be plucked wool because he craves someone else's body. The predecessor, Li Weidong, was purely due to his honesty and thin face. Qin Huairu's 2 sorrowful words softened his heart. 2 people almost got ripped off. The current Li Weidong is not his predecessor, so naturally he cannot let Qin Huairu achieve his wish. Seeing Qin Huairu's red lips about to bloom like flowers, he said first, Sister Jia, what should I say? I was just about to ask you for money, so you came to repay it voluntarily. Repay the money. Qin Huairu was stunned, her eyes widened. It is impossible to repay money, it is impossible to repay money in this lifetime. She came to borrow money, no, it's not me, Qin Huairu instinctively wanted to deny. Li Weidong glanced at the group of little wives rubbing clothes in their hands, but their eyes kept stealing glances towards this side. Yes, a little widow, an unmarried man. 2 people standing together inevitably make people unable to resist daydreaming. With a movement in her heart, she once again stood in front of Qin Huairu and said, "Sister-in-law of the Jia family, you still have a high level of consciousness. You know that I owe money to an old man and are worried about how to repay him. You stopped me early in the morning to repay the money. I didn't say I wanted to pay back the money." Qin Huairu was about to deny it when he caught a glimpse of those little wives staring at them with strange expressions. It is obvious that the young wives have heard what Li Weidong just said. These little daughter-in-law are the meat speakers of the courtyard. If she doesn't repay the money, the young wives will definitely go around nagging, "Qin Huairu owes Li Weidong money. Li Weidong now owes an old man money, but she didn't repay it. It's really heartless." Having a bad reputation, it will be difficult for Qin Huairu to pretend to be pitiful and borrow money from a courtyard in the future. That sister is here to pay you back." Qin Huairu's face was pale, and she smiled awkwardly. She wiped her clothes and took out a bundle of banknotes from her pants pocket. Counted it once, took out a large portion, and handed it over. "Weidong brothers, this is the 5 yuan I borrowed from you last time. I will repay it to you now." Qin Huairu deliberately increased her volume so that the little wives next to her could hear clearly. "Did you see it? I, Qin Huairu, am a person who can repay money." With a reluctant gaze, he left the banknote, feeling a murmur in his heart. Li Weidong feels like a different person. "I didn't borrow any money, instead I lost a lot of money." Hiss, it really hurts. Li Weidong took the bill and briefly counted it, put it into his cotton jacket pocket, and called out to Qin Huairu, who was lost and heading back. "Jia's sister. In law, Su Dongga vomited blood in the middle of the night and was sent to the hospital 2 years ago. At that time, you didn't bring any money, it was me and Silly Zhu who made the money. I remember very clearly that I helped you make a deposit of 1 yuan and 3 cents. Qin Huairu was stunned. In the cold winter of the 12th lunar month, her forehead oozed with dense sweat. How can Li Weidong remember so clearly what happened over 2 years ago? She instinctively wanted to pretend to be pitiful and procrastinate for a few days. "I heard Li Weidong loudly say, 'Sister Jia, if I had lent you this money before, I wouldn't have wanted it urgently. But now I need to repay an old man's money.'" Qin Huairu's big eyes were spinning and spinning, thinking about how to repay the debt. It has to be said that Li Weidong's reputation in the courtyard is really good. The little daughter-in-law of the Lu family put her wet cotton jacket in a basin, wiped the sweat from her temples with her hand, and murmured softly, "Li Weidong is in a difficult situation now. It's really unfair that Qin Huairu hasn't repaid the money." Zhang's aunt also said, "That's right, we used to lend money to the Jia family because they were pitiful and Qin Huairu was nice. I didn't expect Qin Huairu to default on her debts. Who would dare to lend her money in the future? No matter in which era, deadbeats are not popular." Upon hearing the comments, Qin Huairu felt a chill in her heart and realized that if she didn't repay the money this time, it would be difficult to borrow money again in the future. "You wait for sister will come home and bring it to you." Qin Huairu gritted her teeth and walked slowly towards the Jia family. Halfway down, her eyes lit up and she stopped walking. "He Yuzhu, come here. Sister has something to do with you." "Miss Qin, what's up?" A middle-aged man with a worried appearance, dressed in a brown-green cotton jacket, just opened the door and came out. Upon hearing the greeting, he ran over happily. The two of them murmured, and Qin Huairu occasionally glanced over at Li Weidong. It seems that this is to talk to Silly Zhu about the situation. My predecessor and Silly Pillar were both exploited classes, and their relationship has always been good. Li Weidong was not in a hurry either, his hands huddled in his sleeves and squatted on the ground waiting. Anyway, he has to settle this money today. It is only natural to repay debts. Even if the heavenly King Laozi comes, he dare not say a word no. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Lu Zhishen's words. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Chapter 6 Lu Zhishen's words. Qin Huairu and the fool muttered for a while, nodded to each other, and walked over one after the other. Wei Dong brothers, Qin Jie just told me that she's a bit financially strapped these past few days and hasn't paid the tuition fee for the meme yet. How about you wait a while longer, said Silly Zhu casually. He has a good relationship with Li Weidong and feels that Li Weidong will not refute his face. Zhu, I also want to delay for a while, but as you know, I still owe Mr. E 100 yuan. If I don't pay it by the end of the term, Mr. E will take my house. Li Weidong offered an old excuse. As someone who knows the plot and knows the details of Qin Huairu, if you don't take the opportunity to get the money back, your mind will go crazy. That's not possible. How could such a good person like Mr. E do that? Silly Zhu shook his head and said. Li Weidong patted his shoulder with a serious expression and said, You trust an old man so much. So if an old man takes away my house and I save up 100 yuan, you can sell your house to me, okay? Zhu's house is an east wing room, which covers an area of over 50 square meters and has 2 rooms. There is also a 20 square meter ear room next to it, which is the main room in a courtyard. It can be said that it is a top-notch house. The Jia family across from him is a west wing house, although there are also 3 rooms, it is divided into 3 rooms by 2, far inferior to the house of Silly Pillar. Since you want to be a bad person, you need to make some real money. Silly Zhu is not foolish. When he heard that Li Weidong wanted to buy his house for 100 yuan, he certainly couldn't agree. That's not possible, I can't be a master's home. Since you dare not guarantee it, don't pretend to be an uncle here. Li Weidong was too lazy to pay attention to him and turned his gaze to Qin Huairu. Sister-in-law of the Jia family, I'm still in a hurry to make money. If you don't repay the money, I won't want it anymore. I'll pay it back soon, Qin Huairu panicked. Having a reputation for not repaying debts will make it difficult to continue sucking blood in the future. How could Qin Huairu, such a smart person, ruin the reputation of the Jia family for just 1 yuan and 3 cents? She complained in her heart about being foolish. Just now, you said you were easy to deal with Li Weidong, but now 2 words have been grasped by them. It's really embarrassing. White teeth lightly nibbled on the light red lips, and the corners of the eyes became rosy. Her fair and jade-like hands lightly brushed her hair, and the green tea bitch instantly got up and looked at the Silly Pillar. Zhu, do you have any money there? I'll lend some to my sister first, and when she pays her salary next month, I'll repay it to you. I don't have any money either. I just lent you 6 yuan a few days ago, and Rainwater is getting married soon. I just prepared a new blanket for her, and she has spent all her money. Silly Zhu hesitated, feeling a bit guilty. Oh, this guy is lying. Li Weidong knows that Silly Zhu has money. A few days ago, while drinking together, Silly Zhu boasted that he had saved 20 yuan for his own health. Not willing to lend to Qin Huairu now is a bit unexpected for Li Weidong. What about the agreed brainless licking dog? I guess so. In the original work, at the beginning, Silly Zhu had no desire for Qin Huairu's body. It's only because the Jia family is facing difficulties and wants to be a bad person that they bring leftovers to Qin Huairu every day. As for the money, it must have also been lent to Qin Huairu, but not too much. Silly Zhu's current salary is 37.5 yuan, which may not have been as much before, estimated to be around 20 yuan. These funds will cover the expenses of their siblings. It's easy to say that a Silly Pillar is a cafeteria chef who doesn't have to worry about food and drink. Zhishen is actually a spender. Previously, when I was in junior high school, I had to pay a tuition fee of 8 yuan per semester. What we eat and spend is also the salary of a foolish pillar. A big girl can't dress in tattered clothes. If she buys 2 more sets of clothes, half a month's salary will be gone. Also, Rainwater's bicycle was also bought by Silly Zhu for her. These days, a bicycle is priced at around 180 yuan. If the cost of buying a bicycle ticket is included, it will be at least around 240 yuan. And the money He Daqing sent to He Rainwater from Baoqing was hidden by Yi Zhonghai. Silly Zhu and He Rainwater are not clear. In this situation, it is unlikely that Silly Zhu wants to borrow too much money from Qin Huairu. Later, out of helplessness, Qin Huairu introduced her cousin Qin Jingru to Silzu, who was quite willing. If it weren't for Su Dumao cutting off the beard halfway and damaging Qin Jingru's body, Silly Zhu might have married Qin Jingru. This is enough to indicate that at the beginning, Silly Zhu did not crave Qin Huairu's body. Qin Huairu was just skilled at using a transparent cover step by step to trap the foolish pillar, making it impossible for him to break free. Qin Huairu saw that Silly Zhu was unwilling to pay, so she had to run back home and retrieve a pile of money from a drawer. I held it in my hand and felt heartbroken for a long time, sighing and groaning. Stopped by Jia Zhang, who had been staring at her all along. Since Jia Sudong's death, Jia Zhang has been sitting at the door all day collecting shoe soles. She doesn't love to work, nor does she want to bask in the sun, purely to monitor Qin Huairu. Qin Huairu is now 31 years old. In later generations, it was the age of wolves and tigers, sitting on the ground and sucking soil. In addition, her outstanding appearance and charming charm make her very attractive to men. Jia Zhang was afraid that Qin Huairu would remarry and left her alone. At that time, as a rural old lady, she can only return to Jiazhuang. Jia Zhang has enjoyed most of his life in the city. When Lao Jia was alive, he ate Lao Jia's food. When Jia Sudong was alive, he ate Jia Sudong's food. Jia Sudong is dead, she can only eat Qin Huairu. I can't do farm work for a long time. Letting her return to Jiazhuang to become a member of the community and do farm work, wouldn't that take her old life? So, she must hold Qin Huairu tightly in her palm. Qin Huairu, why are you in such a hurry? Pay back the money, pay back Li Weidong's money. When Sudong had an accident a while ago, we borrowed a few yuan from Li Weidong. Now they are in a difficult situation and urgently need the money. Qin Huairu was feeling sorry and upset. Although Jia Zhang was not satisfied with her tone, he didn't care about getting angry with her. Staring wide-eyed, he said, "Why should we repay the money we borrowed based on our abilities? Besides, Li Weidong is a coward. Even if we don't borrow his money, it will be ruined by Lao Yi and Lao Lu. Li Weidong today is not at all cowardly." Although he didn't say anything hard, he made me speechless. Qin Huairu knew that Jia Zhang was an unreasonable person and could only explain. Li Weidong is facing difficulties now. Let's repay the money first. We can borrow it when he becomes a truck driver. Then, I will borrow more to buy you a new cotton jacket. That's about it. Jia Zhang heard the new cotton jacket and pursed her lips, her face slightly softened. She has great confidence in her daughter. Law. On this side, Li Weidong chatted with Silly Zhu. Mainly Silly Zhu is talking. "Weidong brothers, what's wrong with you today? Qin Jia's life is difficult, and we should fulfill our responsibility as neighbors and help her more. How can you make her repay the money? Tell this to an old man, I still owe him 100 yuan. Please ask him not to let me repay it. I told you, Mr. Yi is not that kind of person. He Yuzhu, the two of us used to have a good relationship. But in the future, if you are willing to help the Jia family, it's your own business. Don't shout at me anymore. Also, whether an old man is a good person or not has little to do with me. I just need to repay his debt." Lu Zhishen once said, "Do not rely your fate on the kindness of others." I won't say it anymore. Qin Huairu has brought the money over, and I need to quickly find a way to earn it. Li Weidong took Qin Huairu's money, ignored the two of them, and walked quickly towards the courtyard outside. "Behind me." Silly Zhu scratched his head and looked confused. Did Lu Zhishen say that sentence? End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Chemical Raw Material Stores. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Chemical Raw Material Stores recovered 4.5 yuan of debt from Qin Huairu, and Li Weidong had a total of 20.7 yuan. This money is enough to do a big job. Out of the courtyard. On both sides of the street are houses built with blue bricks, with rough white-gray painted slogans on the walls. The pedestrians were wearing thick cotton jackets and tattered felt hats, cotton masks, and gasping for breath. Most pedestrians walk, and occasionally they can see respectable people wearing gray Zhongshan suits with a split hairstyle riding bicycles passing by. Although not as bustling as later generations, there is still a sense of peace and progress. This kind of atmosphere made Li Weidong energetic, and he strode towards the chemical material store 5 miles away. Of course, there are also buses passing by on the road. It is different from buses in later generations. There is a huge gas storage bag on the roof, jokingly referred to as the atmospheric bag. Due to the scarcity of resources, buses in this era were forced to install stoves to burn charcoal or wood. The gas produced by combustion replaces gasoline and provides power for the normal operation of buses. Li Weidong is reluctant to spend the money to buy a bus ticket. The chemical raw material market is located on Qianmen Street. Starting from Qianmen Arrow Tower in the north and ending at the intersection of Tianxiao Road in the south, it connects with Tianxiao South Street. There is a rhyme in the old capital that goes: in front of the drum tower in the east and west. In the old days, these places were bustling commercial districts bustling with tourists, and the most bustling one was Qianmen Street. Before the liberation, there were many professional markets located here, such as fresh fish market, meat market, fruit market, cloth market, grass market, pig market, grain market, jewelry market, melon seed market, etc. There are also some theaters, tea gardens, etc. Although these shops have now been nationalized, what has changed is only the nature of their operations, and there has been no change in the building structure. Amidst the green trees, there are hundreds of buildings with different styles, which look quite luxurious and imposing. By the time we arrived at the chemical raw material store, we had already made progress. As soon as she entered the door, the salesperson Niu, who was sitting behind the counter, greeted Li Weidong with a smile and said, "Weidong, why are you so free today? Are you coming to see my sister?" "Yeah, I've been away from the store for over a month, and I'm almost missing you." Li Weidong smirked playfully. "Virtuous, now you've learned to be smooth-tongued." Sister Niu casually threw a bag of copper powder to a male comrade wearing black-framed glasses and exuding a refined aura. Ignoring the male comrade's request for weighing, he stood up and waved to Li Weidong. "Weidong, I heard that your father passed away." "Yeah, it happened not long ago." "Are you still going back to the sales department?" "Why don't I go tell the department head?" Sister Niu couldn't bear to part with Li Weidong. This young man works hard and doesn't slack off. One person can handle two. Every time it's almost time to finish work, I also help tidy up the counter. With him around, when encountering heavier materials, Big Sister Niu doesn't have to worry. Unlike the new young man who is said to be a relative of the deputy department head, he spends his days hiding in the warehouse and chatting with those old ladies. "No, I'll pick up my father's shift in a few days and work as a truck driver in the 3rd Steel Rolling Mill Convoy," Li Weidong said gratefully. "That's a good job. I heard that truck drivers can get this number every month." Sister Niu slapped her and her eyes lit up. She lowered her voice and said, "It seems like you're not married yet." "I have a niece who works in a textile factory and looks like a flower. How about I help you get married?" Li Weidong politely declined, "Thank you, Sister Niu. I already have a partner." "It's a pity. It's a pity." Sister Niu looked regretful. "If I had known that Li Weidong could take over his old man's class, I would have already introduced my niece to him." The two chatted for a while, and Li Weidong finally arrived at the person to wait for. I saw 3 young people wearing black uniforms, with portraits pinned to their chests and black shallow-brimmed hats, walking in with laughter and conversation. Huguangliang, electronic tube radios are now being installed in the Magic City. The mining machines are outdated and can only receive one channel. When the channel stops, you can only hear the sizzling sound of electricity. If you give the mining machines as gifts to the leaves, they will despise them. If you want an electronic tube radio, I'll go to a department store and buy one. Let me tell you what, this time Yi and Professor Sun are exploring mines in the northwest, which is remote and inconvenient to buy batteries. That's why I thought of making a mining machine for her. Gao Ming, Lao Hu's kung fu in patting the mother.in.law is excellent. My brothers greatly admire him. Don't talk nonsense, there is a pure relationship between me and Yi. Old Hu, you're just too shallow-skinned. In the new society, it's normal for men and women to fall in love. Li Weidong turned around, and a happy expression flashed in his dark eyes. The 3 people who came in were college students from the Department of Physics at Qin University, and they were also enthusiasts of mining machines. A ore machine is a wireless receiver that has no power supply, uses or for detection, and adds a tuning circuit. The ore machine can be manually assembled due to its low cost. It does not require batteries, can be used for life, and is free of maintenance costs, which is highly favored by the public. There are so many advantages to mining machines, but they were not widely promoted in the following time, and there are also fatal drawbacks. Natural ores need to be patient in finding sensitive points in order to receive radio signals, and not every piece of ore can be used. It is common to purchase a lot of ore and waste a lot of materials, but the ore machine cannot receive the signal. In this way, the technical threshold for making ore machines has been raised. Most people who make mining machines are radio enthusiasts. In an era where radios were equivalent to cars, those who could afford to play with radios were those with culture and some money. For example, Hu Guangliang. When Li Weidong was a temporary worker, Hu Guangliang often came to purchase raw materials for the ore machine. The 2 of them are already familiar with each other. Knowing that he comes from a military district compound. The 2 people next to him were also from the ministerial compound. Money is one aspect, and more importantly, an introduction letter for purchasing chemical materials. Like buying grain and asking for grain vouchers, buying meat requires a meat ticket, buying an old hen requires a poultry ticket, buying a bicycle requires a bicycle ticket, buying industrial products such as toothpaste, steel precision pots, enamel pots, flashlights, etc. requires an industrial voucher. The materials required for assembling the ore machine, such as ore, capacitor, 2200 picosecond, high-resistance earphones, 2 EP9 diode, 1 N60 diode, enameled wire, variable capacitor, etc. are controlled materials and require an introduction letter from the unit to be purchased at the chemical raw material market. Ordinary people have no connections at all. This is also why Li Weidong is waiting for these 3 young college students. They are members of the Tsinghua Physics Radio Experimental Group and hold an introduction letter issued by Tsinghua University. Big sister, follow the materials on the list and start with a group. Hu Guangliang took out the introduction letter and shook it on the counter, handing the list to Big Sister Nyo. The production of ore machines is extremely difficult and often fails. He made up his mind today that no matter how much money he spent, he would help Yi assemble a mining machine that could receive radio programs from Beijing. Okay, wait a moment. All of them are familiar customers. These young college students have spent a total of 400 to 500 yuan here. Sister Nyo didn't even read the introduction letter and prepared to go to the warehouse to collect materials with a list. As soon as she walked out of the counter, she was stopped by Li Weidong and said, "Sister Nyo, since I'm idle and familiar with the warehouse, let me go." "Okay, I'll treat you to lunch at noon and call my niece," Big Sister Nyo joked, hoping for someone to help. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. This is very scientific. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. This is very scientifically. Weidong worked as a temporary worker in the chemical materials department for 3 years, and could easily find the materials he needed with his eyes closed. Copper ore, capacitor, 2200 picosecond, high-resistance earphones, 2 EP9 diode, 1 N60 diode, enameled wire, variable capacitor. In just 5 minutes, Li Weidong walked out with a bamboo basket filled with materials. At this moment, Hu Guangliang and the others had already paid and were sitting at a small table by the wall in the storefront. In addition to 3 people, there were also 4 or 5 young people who looked like college students gathered there. Although Li Weidong is not clear about their names, he also knows that they are all radio enthusiasts. Making ore machines is a very niche and quirky hobby, similar to playing racing and participating in the Haitian feast in later generations. Similarly, enthusiasts also need to communicate with each other. The side room of the chemical materials department has several tables and provides tea, which is the best place for communication. Those young people learned about Hu Guangliang's ideas and came up with suggestions. Materials, making ore machines, materials are very important. Lao Hu, don't save money. I heard my friend from the armory said that the Q. value of the 222 air variable capacitor produced by military aircraft can reach 15,000. If we buy one, we can definitely receive 2 more radio stations. That's right, the materials in the chemical materials department are all from large channels, so it's better to go to the laboratory of the arsenal. The person who said this was a young man dressed in a military academy. Li Weidong also knows him, but he doesn't know his name. I only know that everyone calls him Lao Bai. Wearing a uniform all day, wearing a small military cap, and a cowhide hustle and bustle. If in the past, Li Weidong had just smiled lightly upon hearing these words. If you don't interfere in the sales department, he can save some effort. But not today. Old Bai, the performance of air variable capacitors may not necessarily be better than that of small sealed variable capacitors. This goes against common sense, echoing in everyone's ears like a thunderbolt. They turned their heads together and saw a young man standing quietly with a bamboo basket. Although the young man was wearing a worn-out cotton jacket, he had an indescribable heroic aura on his body. Hu Guangliang was the first to react. He stood up with a smile on his face, walked over and punched Li Weidong. Weidong, you're wearing a tattered cotton jacket today, I didn't even recognize it earlier. Where have you been lately? I've been here several times but haven't seen you. I thought you weren't working in the store anymore. They are all young people who enjoy being lively. Every time when making mining machines, Li Weidong always watches from the side. Over time, I can still be considered half a radio enthusiast. Although not practical and with weak theoretical knowledge, my familiarity with various materials far exceeds that of these enthusiasts. In the past, the materials needed by Hu Guangliang were all named for Li Weidong to choose. It's true that I'm not doing it anymore, isn't it, because I missed a few brothers? Li Weidong grinned. The two exchanged pleasantries for a while, but the general next to them became unhappy. Weidong, people who play mining machines know that the quality and performance of different variable capacitors are different. A small sealed variable capacitor has worse performance than an air variable capacitor, which is determined by their manufacturing principle. Hu Guangliang also said, today is not because my friend didn't give you face, but because what you said has already violated scientific principles. If in the past, I would have made do with these materials. If today is not possible, I will go and return them now. Li Weidong stood in front of Hu Guangliang by mistake and said, practice leads to true knowledge. How about we test it? This proposal immediately gained the support of everyone. This is a good idea. We often use capacitors, but we have never tested their Q value. Weidong is an honest person. Although his cultural level is not high, he knows more about mining machines than I do. That's right, just test which Q value is high and you'll know. Okay, then let's test it. Hu Guangliang nodded. He also wants to know how much the Q value of a small sealed variable capacitor can reach. You guys wait, I'll go get the testing tools. Li Weidong placed the bamboo basket on the table and turned to walk towards Niu Dahong. Niu Jia, this is the situation. After listening to Li Weidong's narration, Niu Dahong, who was knitting a sweater, frowned. I don't understand what you're talking about. What tools are needed for testing? I'll give you an order. Don't let these kids return them, otherwise it will be troublesome to reconcile with the finance department by the end of the month. Don't worry, with me around, they can't just return the goods, they have to buy again. Li Weidong took the order and entered the warehouse. 5 minutes later, holding a fist-sized copper wire ring, a frequency meter, and several lacquered copper wires, he walked out. Hu Guangliang has already placed the variable capacitor on the table. Li Weidong walked to the table and looked at the crowd. I connected the coil in parallel with a variable capacitor as an LC circuit to detect the Q value of the coil. Since the coil is used as a constant value here, the Q value measured in parallel with different non-variable capacitors will also change, indirectly measuring the performance of the variable capacitor. Do you have any objections to this method? Hu Guangliang nodded and said, no. Lao Bai nodded and said, no. Everyone nodded and said, no. Li Weidong quickly connected the coil and finally connected it to the frequency meter. At the moment of connection, the dark blue screen of the frequency meter lit up. The line of numbers that appears above makes everyone take a deep breath. 23,000, oh my goodness, look, there's 23,000, much higher than the air level of military planes. Impossible, absolutely impossible, this is not scientific. Old Bai looked incredulous and suddenly lifted his head to look at Li Weidong. Did you tamper with something? Can't you afford to lose? Li Weidong frowned and was about to speak when he was stopped by Hu Guangliang. Old Bai, you're not sure who Weidong is. How could he possibly be a troublemaker? Besides, what's the relationship between selling this variable capacitor today and Weidong? Old Bai is speechless. But he is a master who never gives up until he reaches the Yellow River. I picked up the frequency meter again and tested it myself, looking at the dazzling 23,000 on it, which forced me to accept the result. Weidong brothers, tell them why this thing is not scientific. Everyone gathered around, and it was unbelievable that an old-fashioned variable capacitor could surpass the latest air variable capacitor in terms of performance. Li Weidong smiled faintly and picked up the capacitor, saying, you are all college students who have studied physics and often conduct experiments. You should know that there is a phenomenon in physics called error. In principle, air variable capacitors have better performance than sealed variable capacitors. But the cleanliness during the production of variable capacitors, the spacing between capacitors, and the degree of oxidation can all lead to significant discrepancies between the produced capacitor and the imagined capacitor. Air capacitors are new products, and the process is generally not as mature as old products. After speaking, Li Weidong looked around the crowd and said, so, this is very scientific. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Mineral Radio. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Chapter 9. Mineral Radio. In the 1960s, Tsinghua University did not admit talented students, art students, actors, or foreign students. As a first-class university in China, it is known as the cradle of engineers. It is said that there is also an atomic nuclear reactor experimental base on campus. Every student who is admitted to Tsinghua is worthy of the title of academic achiever. Don't look at Lao Bai wearing a military coat all day, with a cowhide-like appearance. In fact, he is also a member of the experimental group of the Tsinghua Physics Department and has participated in the research of national key projects. Upon hearing Li Weidong mention error, he immediately understood why there was an unscientific phenomenon. However, he still had some doubts in his heart. How could a temporary worker know so much? Hu Guangliang next to him saw him standing there like a wooden stake, and touched him with his elbow. Old Bai, you misunderstood Wei Dong just now. Apologize quickly. Old Bai seemed unable to pull down that face, dawdling and wriggling there. I guess so, although this is the closest era in history to equality for all, there is still a slight difference between generals and ordinary people. Li Weidong still hopes that these brothers can solve the money owed to Yi Zhonghai. How could they make him unable to come down? No need to apologize, this is an academic discussion, it's normal to have different opinions. I've only been in the material store for a long time, and I've seen more of it. Theoretical knowledge is far inferior to you tomorrow's spoiled ones. Lao Bai breathed a sigh of relief and gave Li Weidong a grateful glance. This temporary worker seems to have some meaning. Hu Guangliang glared at him and said, Li Weidong is trying to save face for you. In the future, don't accuse others of cheating without evidence. Got it, you're even more lenient than my old man. Old Bai smiled awkwardly. When the supply and marketing cooperative opens, I'll invite the Wei Dong brothers to drink Arctic Ocean. After resolving the dispute, Hu Guangliang began assembling the ore machine. The assembly work is not complicated. Just drill a few holes on the wooden board to fix the wiring posts, air coils, and so on. Use high-resistance secondary conversion to convert impedance. Add another 2000 pf capacitor, connect it and assemble it. The key difficulty lies in how to install the pyroxene ore used for detection. This is related to whether the ore machine can receive the radio clearly. Hu Guangliang carefully perforated the chalcopyrite and installed it on a wooden board, connecting it with wires. Is it done? Lao Bai asked eagerly. I'm not sure, but this time I have a strong feeling that I should be able to receive the Beijing broadcasting station. Hu Guangliang wiped the sweat off his forehead. He has already done his best just now. If it still doesn't work, we can only buy a radio for Yi as suggested by Lao Bai and his team. No big deal, buy more batteries for the leaves to carry. At this point, the group members had already connected a several meter-long antenna to the ore machine. Alright, practice is the only way to test truth, success or failure depends on this action. Hu Guangliang pressed the button, and the ore machine made a white noise of hissing. Hu Guangliang had a solemn expression and slowly twisted the button. Shush. Suddenly, a melodious sound of music came from the mining machine. The little pine tree is growing fast, with green leaves and new shoots, and the golden sun shining on you. The sound of music excited everyone. There is no doubt that the production of the ore machine has been successful. Lao Bai gave a thumbs up and said, Bright, I'm convinced. Only you can make a mineral machine with such a clear voice. Hu Guangliang also breathed a sigh of relief. Only Li Weidong's expression remained unchanged, still standing with both hands in his arms. Just now he clearly saw Hu Guangliang's hands trembling twice while installing the ore, and the position of the ore changed. How could it have been so smooth? Is there also a lack of scientificity? Let's go, Brother Guangliang has won the game today. I'll invite everyone to drink in the Arctic Ocean. Just as Lao Bai was preparing to tidy up the ore machine, the radio program had also finished playing. Alright, that's all for the performance of Little Pine Tree by the youth choir. Next, our Liaoshen radio station will play the opera Red Guards of Honghu Lake. Liaoshen radio station. Old Bai's hand stood in the air, with his fingertips only 0.01 minutes away from the ore machine. Hu Guangliang's face suddenly turned black like ostrich ink. The several college students looked at each other, all seeing shock in each other's eyes. How did the promised Beijing broadcasting station become Liaoshen broadcasting station? It must be that the ore was misplaced. Keep it down, Lao Hu is in a bad mood. Hu Guangliang's mood is indeed not good. Once the ore machine is installed, the radio station that can be received is determined and cannot be changed. He let out a long sigh and said, Forget it, I'll buy a radio for Yi. Hu Guangliang was about to go clean up the waste ore machine when Li Weidong stood up. Bright, can I give it a try? Try it. Hu Guangliang's mind was filled with question marks. You know, I have been working in a materials store for 3 years, and practice makes perfect. If you could lend me a letter of introduction, I might be able to make a mineral machine that can receive Beijing radio station. While Li Weidong was speaking, he took advantage of everyone's lack of attention and started playing with the ore machine. At this point, the 10,000 times experience system is in effect, and Li Weidong's manipulation of the ore machine is equivalent to manipulating it tens of thousands of times. Experience plus 1, experience plus 1, experience plus 1. He seemed to see countless experiences emerging from above. By the time Li Weidong put down the mining machine, he had already become a senior expert in mining machines. The golden finger is so magical. At this moment, Hu Guanliang also reacted and forced a smile, saying, Brother Weidong, I know you have good intentions, but things like ore machines can't be assembled with just your eyes. In addition to rich experience, luck is also needed. Like me, who has assembled at least a few hundred units, isn't it still embarrassing today? Lao Bai also said, don't waste money. With that little money, why not go to the supply and marketing agency to buy a few bottles of Arctic Ocean? He didn't mean anything, he just felt that Li Weidong was a bit out of control. The materials for assembling the ore machine are not expensive, only about 5 yuan. However, Li Weidong is a temporary worker, and his attire doesn't look like someone with a wealthy background. Using 5 yuan to float the water, even this general cannot do such a thing. Li Weidong is certainly confident. In front of an old hand who has assembled 10,000 ore machines, the so-called theory of luck does not exist. He insisted, how do you know if you don't try? Hu Guanliang knew that Li Weidong was not Meng Lang's character, and seeing him so persistent, he stopped saying anything more. Take out a piece of paper covered with a red stamp from the canvas bag, then take out 5 yuan from the pocket and hand it over. This time count towards me. Li Weidong didn't take the money, just took the manuscript and turned towards the counter. Don't worry, I, Li Weidong, handle things with confidence. Everyone behind them pouted. Brag. Is it really something that ordinary people can play with when it comes to mining machines? End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Self-control. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Self-control. Saleswoman Niu saw that Li Weidong was going to buy materials for a mining machine, and her small eyes widened even larger than copper bells. Weidong, listen to big sister's advice. Things like ore machines are not something we can play with. As a salesperson in a chemical materials store, Sister Niu often sees these radio enthusiasts wasting money. I have scolded them several times for being brainwashed. I didn't expect Li Weidong to feel confused today. Can the problem of assembling a mining machine still be contagious? Her concern warmed Li Weidong's heart, and he handed the introduction letter to Sister Niu, saying, Don't worry, I, Li Weidong, have my own confidence in my actions. Ah, why don't you listen to advice, kid? Sister Niu smiled bitterly twice, opened a bill, handed it to Li Weidong, and said loudly, the total is 5.23 yuan. If you don't have the money, I can take some trouble to tear up the bill. In this era, a salesperson is like an old man. When he opens an order and wants to go back, there is only one outcome, which is to be beaten up and thrown out. His predecessor, Li Weidong, was a gold medal thug in a chemical materials store. He naturally understood Sister Niu's kindness and handed him a handful of money. Don't worry, I, Li Weidong, have my own confidence in my actions. Sister Niu. A few days no see, how could this once honest child become so arrogant? Taking the money with a grudge, he stamped it with a blue stamp on the bill and handed it to Li Weidong. Li Weidong was familiar with the road and carried a bamboo basket into the warehouse. Soon, he picked up a full basket of materials and came out. Old Bai, a young man with a natural disposition, couldn't bear to see others pulling their weight in front of him. He shouted, Everyone has big eyes. Let Comrade Wei Dong teach you how to assemble a mineral radio. Isn't it a joke for someone who graduated from junior high school to teach top students at Tsinghua University? The few students next to them, although concerned about Li Weidong's face and didn't say anything, their mouths slightly curled up and they held their hands on their chests, looking like they were watching a good show. Even Hu Guangliang, who was optimistic about Li Weidong, felt unreliable and thought of finding a reason to buy a waist or radio for 5 yuan later. However, when Li Weidong spread the materials on the table, Hu Guangliang's expression suddenly changed and he became serious. The placement of materials may seem casual, but they are arranged in the order of installation. Seeing the subtle, did Li Weidong really assemble a mining machine before? Just as Hu Guangliang was puzzled, Li Weidong's dazzling actions made him even more startled. Generally, when installing a mining machine, people need to calculate the distance of the wiring harness in advance and then install it step by step. Li Weidong, however, was very casual, as if he had already known the location of the components, popping and continuously installing them on the wooden board. His carelessness made Old Bai burst out laughing uncontrollably. "Hello, Wei Dong, the ore machine is a high-precision instrument. Have you given up on doing this?" Hu Guangliang, however, saw some tricks and glared at him. "Don't disturb Wei Dong's operation. Didn't you see that the components installed by Wei Dong were just right?" Old Bai had always been impressed by Hu Guangliang's words, and upon hearing him say so, he put aside his carefree attitude and focused all his attention on Li Weidong's rapidly moving hands. Soon, his expression became serious, his elbow resting on his chin, and his eyes filled with disbelief. For a moment, the originally noisy lounge quieted down, only the sound of components being inserted could be heard. Miss Niu, who was knitting a sweater, raised her head and looked up. Although she was puzzled that these young Hua students would be so quiet, she didn't care and lowered her head to continue knitting. Winter is coming soon, and she wants to knit a pair of woolen socks for each of the 2 children before the heavy snow falls. At this point, Li Weidong had entered a peculiar realm, where he installed components without thinking at all, relying solely on the memory of his muscles. Quickly, the most critical and difficult step of ore installation was reached. Hu Guangliang couldn't help but clench his fist and bite his teeth. The reason why he failed just now was because the ore was installed incorrectly. Li Weidong's previous steps were flawless. If the ore installation is not a problem, maybe it can really be successful. He couldn't help but cheer for Li Weidong in his heart. But the next second, he couldn't help but take a deep breath. Because Li Weidong surprisingly closed his eyes. No, not only did he close his eyes, but his hands kept dancing, operating the drill bit and installing the ore onto the wooden board. How dare he? Just as Hu Guangliang wanted to remind him, with Li Weidong gently pressing, the ore fell into the card slot with a snap. The production of the ore machine has been completed. The clamor that was supposed to arrive has not been heard for a long time. Everyone was stunned. When did assembling a mining machine become as easy as assembling a toy? Li Weidong opened his eyes and looked at the surprised crowd, saying, "What's wrong with the big guy? Hurry up and pull up the antenna, let's check it out." "Oh, yes, hurry up and test." Old Bai closed his almost fallen chin with his hands and picked up the antenna to connect to the mining machine. After Li Weidong confirmed that the cable interface was stable, he pushed the ore machine in front of Hu Guangliang and said, "Guangliang, come and test it." Guangliang looked at the ore machine that was almost installed with his eyes closed, and tried hard to swallow his saliva. If this mining machine can operate normally, their group of radio enthusiasts will lose face. Using trembling hands to rotate the button, a sizzling sound came from inside the mining machine. "Well, the line is normal." Hu Guangliang raised his eyelids and continued to twist the button to search for a radio station. Soon, a crisp and pleasant sound came from the ore machine. "This is Beijing radio station, this is Beijing radio station, now please enjoy it. Jingqing Tai." Hu Guangliang couldn't help but give a thumbs up to Li Weidong and said, "I'm convinced." Li Weidong gave a faint smile and winked, "Continue to search for the platform." Hu Guangliang was stunned for a moment before quickly realizing that he couldn't set up a channel and said, "Can't this mining machine receive 2 radio stations?" In later generations, ore machines could indeed receive multiple radio stations, but in this era, ore was used for filtering, and under normal circumstances, only 1 radio station could be received. "It should be possible to receive 2 or 3, Li Weidong nodded confidently. "It is normal to receive 2 radio stations after 10,000 assembly experiences, combined with carefully selected ores." 2. Hu Guangliang suppressed his ecstasy and continued to twist the button. Soon, a new voice came from the ore machine again, "The water of Honghu Lake is pounding with waves. You can really receive 2 radio stations." The old white next to him couldn't stand any longer and reached out to turn the button. "Brother Guangming, didn't Brother Wei Dong say he could receive 3 stations? Let me find the 3rd station." Hu Guangliang, who had always been generous, reached out and shook old Bai's arm away, saying, "Your hand is not very light or heavy, don't touch it." It's not that he's stingy, but that this mining machine is really important. Even if she could only receive 2 radio stations and give them to Yi, it was enough to accompany her through lonely times in the northwest. End of this chapter.